started in the master's program with me back in 2007. We took career counseling together and just sort of stayed connected. Granted, Facebook is a wealth of information and reconnection, and so I've been following Marie for the past several years. And as we were starting to plan this summer institute around the many faces of grief, Marie immediately popped into my mind as someone who was uniquely positioned to discuss topics of relevance to us today, and it follows quite nicely from the presentation that we just had. So I will let her introduce her entourage, but Marie Burgess.
Right, so I'm an alumna of the GW School Counseling Master's Program. So, is there any school counselors? All right, my team that I have with me, I have my husband Danny, that is recording for my other team members that aren't here with us today. My father-in-law Dave, my son Harvey, and my friend Amanda. So Harvey hasn't quite decided if he's going to remain quiet or if he will start chit-chatting. I block it out because I'm a mom and I can do that, but if it becomes distracting, you can just like put a hand up and just wheel him out. And he'll probably want to see other things that he likes. But I was asked to come here today because I was a trained counselor through the master's program here, so I did the whole K-Prep, and I'm a national certified counselor and have maintained that certification. And after practicing as a school counselor for a couple of years, I had my son, and my son is disabled, and so today I will be wearing two hats. I'm a certified counselor. I work as a counselor every day with high school students, and then I go home and I'm a mom to a disabled child. So I'll be sharing a lot with you today. I want to talk a little bit about grief, not a little bit, but just a refresher on specific concepts and theories that will apply to living in the disabled community. And then I'll kind of connect the two. I'll show you a lot of shared experiences that you probably are unfamiliar with unless you are a caretaker or a family member to someone that is disabled. And then I have some suggestions for you, both from myself and from parents in the community on how to work with clients, either the caretakers of, the parents, or actually a disabled person, so they can help them. So first I wanted to start with a quote from J.W. Warden, who is a grief theorist. He says that each person's grief is like all other people's grief. Each person's grief is like some other person's grief, and each person's grief is like no other person's grief. I really like this quote because it kind of expresses to us that grief is both a universal concept that we all experience without choice, but it is uniquely individualized to each of us. All right, so my goals today, kind of already went over them, but I'll just state them again. I'm just going to do basic theory and concepts, apply those traditional grief theory concepts to living with disability, share some experiences with you, and you may have seen some of my display, and I'll kind of reference that a little bit. But my ultimate goal is to give you all, as helping professionals, insight into the lives of people in this community, including myself, so you can better support us. So when we think about grief theory, we might think of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 5 stages of grief. Sound familiar? This is what most people think of when they think grief, 5 stages. If you're familiar with this or not, this was first represented in her book on death and dying in 1969. Originally studied with people for terminal illness. And it became very popular because physicians, helping professionals, nurses, therapists, they all liked how the stages were very linear. You could tuck things in really neatly. So they're like, hey, I really like this. I'm going to show it to everyone. I'm going to share it with everyone. Even though it wasn't founded in research with the general population, it spread. And it became very popular. And that's kind of one of the reasons why it's one of the things that pops up to us whenever we think about grief theory. We think, oh yeah, the stages. I've heard of those. Denial, anger, but oh yeah. I must be going through that. And one of the rumors with this theory is that people started saying it's a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and that you go through it one at a time. But the author never said that. She never said that. In fact, she said the opposite. She said you can go back and forth and you can skip them, and maybe you start at a different place than someone else based on coping, your experiences, all of that. This is what we think when we think traditional loss, which is someone has died. We think basic grief theory, this is one of the main ones. There are a couple of other concepts that in grief theory that I wanted to bring up because they apply later to living with disability. Ambiguous loss, type 2 trauma, and resilience. And I had to talk about type 1 trauma in order to talk about type 2. But ambiguous loss is when someone has an ongoing situation, there's no closure. This can happen, if someone goes MIA in a war, you have someone with Alzheimer's that is no longer there, but they're physically there. Type 1 trauma is what we think was natural disasters. We think about a car accident as being, it has a definitive beginning and end. It doesn't carry on, which is what type 2 trauma does. It carries on for an unknown period of time. It can happen over and over again. This is like when you think of someone that has experienced abuse or some type of chronic neglect, or there's specific small issues that kind of compound, and this is kind of what we're living with, okay? Type 2 trauma, things that happen over and over again. And resilience, which we kind of all know as health professionals is key into the healing process, is being able to get back to a point after the crisis that you experienced to a place where you're functioning in society again. Ambiguous loss, type 2 trauma, and resilience all come together, and I'll reference back to them when it's appropriate, but this is just the basics. Okay, so when we talk about disability, we are very easily able to think of physical disability. Someone's in a wheelchair, or they need a cane, their feet is something wrong, they can't walk. But we know, as helping professionals, especially mental health professionals, that there are a lot of disabilities or diagnoses that aren't physical. They go unseen, right? You cannot see them. That doesn't mean they're not there and that people aren't struggling. So for today, when we think about what is a disability, we're going to go with the Americans with Disabilities Act definition of what a disability is. So the ADA says a person has a disability if they have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And that begs the question, well, what is a major life activity? What are those considered? Major life activities are basic caring for yourself. So sleeping, walking, standing, breathing, communicating. Okay, but those are things that someone does out into the world, but it also includes major bodily functions, like the function of your immune system or your bowel system, your brain, respiratory functions, right? So, and if anyone has a significant impairment in one of those areas, they can be classified as someone having a disability. And according to the ADA's most recent published results, which was in 2010, 1 in 5 Americans has a disability. That's a lot. That's 20%. And disability can start at birth, like it did with my child, or it can happen midlife, if something happens to you, or as we know, it can happen in later onset in older age with Alzheimer's and dementia. Those all qualify. In fact, there's so many disabilities, the ADA doesn't list them. They don't list anything. If you have an impairment in one of these areas, you qualify. Okay? There's so many that they can't list them. Okay, so my goal today is to apply some of the grief theory and look at it through a disability lens. So when we think about grief, and traditional grief and loss, it's the death of a person, right? It's a death. There is a death. Now, I'm not talking like disenfranchised grief where there's a loss of a relationship, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about there's a death, physical death and loss. But in disability, there is no death. The people are alive, right in front of you, every single day. So the grief that we experience, myself included, has to do with the grief of the loss, of the plans, the hopes, the dreams, the things that you expect to be able to do with a person that you won't be able to do. based on their disability as a result of that. And the hard part, you know, when we're going through a traditional grief experience, we know that there are things that happen in life that might remind us of that person. You know, a song comes on the radio and you're like, oh man, that was our song, you know, and that gets you upset for a minute. And that kind of dissipates over time as you readjust to your new normal without that person. But when you're living in a community with disability, tasks of daily activity can become devastating reminders of just how serious your situation is. So whether it's going to the playground with your child and seeing everyone run around when your child can't, or just seeing, you know, on Facebook, you know, all these wonderful things, and you're so happy for other people, but it just reminds you that that's not going to happen for you. Okay? And while today I'm speaking from the perspective of a parent of a disabled child, remember I was a counselor first, okay, so this is kind of interesting. But then I had a child born to me, actually, not even born, I'll get into it, that has disabling conditions. That's what I'm speaking from. But his experiences, my experiences, our experiences are not unique to our situation. Remember, 1 in 5 people has a disability. So what I'm saying today can be applied to the larger community. When I talk about medical supplies, because, you know, outside of physical disabilities where you might just need a wheelchair, and I say just me, right? Because to me that's like, I can deal with that, okay? But outside of physical disabilities, most people have chronic medical conditions that need everyday attention or they'll die, my son included. So your life becomes then enthralled with medical supplies, a whole new language. And that's part of what I'm going to talk about next, is shared experiences. One of the things that I thought would be really important today is giving you a peek into the lives of people like me, the people like my son, my family. Because, you know this as counselors, we don't know things until they happen to us, right? And so now I know a lot of things that I wouldn't have known before. And I don't have a choice anymore about whether I want to know them. If I choose not to know them and choose not to do anything about them, my son will die. So part of what I want to share is what my life is like, and because then that can be applied to other people. And I'm not just sharing, you guys are going to be helping. Because if you looked in your packet, there's a quiz. We're going to have quizzes, we're going to do role plays, okay? I'm going to get you guys involved so that you can kind of get a little, just a peek of what life is like. Because if you're out there and you get a client that is me, say I'm your client, I want you to know when I say I have a disabled child, oh yeah, okay, I know that that person has a lot going on that probably none of other people do, and I sure don't. Okay? So I just want you to have a little bit of a better understanding of what life is like. Okay. So we know people of all ages can be disabled. Hopefully you were able to read some of the materials ahead of time, because I'll be referencing them. We're going to talk about Welcome to Holland. You're going to have a couple of quizzes. They'll be quick, I promise. I'm going to show you some photos from my life, our personal life as a team. We're going to do a couple role plays, which my husband will be facilitating. 6 volunteers, so I will need 6. So if you're like, I'm totally into role plays, like, know who you are now, because after like our second quiz, I'm going to ask my volunteers to go out into the hallway with my husband, okay? And they're quick, they're like 30 seconds. It's much faster than ones in class, am I right? That's why some people are like, role plays, ooh, people don't like it. I was like, we're counselors. We do this all the time. It's really not a big problem. And then I'm going to share with you a little bit about Amsterdam International. You might be like, what is this? We'll go over it. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Harvey. So I'm actually going to share about Harvey right now. So some of this other stuff I can reference a little bit later. So Harvey, when I stumbled over him being born, Harvey I knew was going to have a struggle in life when I was 20 weeks pregnant. Because out of my anatomy sonogram, they found that he had a cleft lip. They could not tell us if he had a cleft palate. That was going to be a mystery until he was born. Oh, great, okay? Questions. I'm a planner. I like to know things, like to find answers, and now there's nothing I can do. That was stressful. You know, I would start asking myself, how could Should I have taken a different vitamin? Should I not have any caffeine? You know, I'm start looking to myself, as most people do, for things I could have done differently, when really I had no control over the situation. And so that's at 20 weeks. So I know my child's going to be born struggling. Fantastic. Then he was born early, for reasons that we kind of don't really understand yet, other than there wasn't enough room in there. Okay, I don't really know how that happens, but it happened. So then he was born early and quite traumatically also. And that was hard on everybody. And it didn't stop. It didn't stop. You think, oh, he can have surgery, so we do this. We'll do this. He was born early, okay, he's in the NICU for a month, we can do this. Then he didn't pass his newborn hearing screenings. So he was thought to be deaf. So when he was 6 months old, he's been wearing hearing aids since he was 6 months old. The day he got out of the NICU, we had our first appointment with a specialist. And we haven't stopped since. He had his first major surgery when he was 6 months old, and he hasn't stopped having surgeries. So, amazingly, having a cleft lip and palate is like the least of our worries at this point, because they've been repaired. You know, my son started having, we found out he had 2 blood disorders, 2, not 1, 2, after a very serious surgery gone awry, like helicopter ride awry, okay? PICU, intensive care unit for pediatrics. And multiple weeks, I mean, Susie knows, I mean, he spent like a good part of his life in the hospital, in and out for medical reasons. He started having seizures shortly after his first birthday. So, you know, as we adjust, right, we're adjusting. Okay, he's got the blood disorder, we got to have medication on hand. He's got this, we got to do this. He starts having seizures. Okay, now we add neurology, EEGs, all that stuff. Then it was no longer safe for him to eat because of the seizures. We're like, okay. As we're investigating those, we find out that his cleft didn't stop. He had a cleft in his esophagus, called a laryngeal cleft, also rare. Okay. He had lots of center line issues, by the way, but nothing that they can confirm with a genetic diagnosis, which we've had all of our genomes have been analyzed, and nobody can find anything conclusive. No answers. No answers, over and over again, no answers. We don't know why, we don't know why. Great. So he was just diagnosed in June as finally our first diagnosis. He's almost 3. Okay, we have a diagnosis, and it's a rough one. He has Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which is a rare form of epilepsy. It's usually diagnosed early on in life, but you can kind of have it and develop it later on as well. But people usually get diagnosed as children. He has 4 types of seizures that he has. He has them all the time. He's on 4 seizure medications a couple times a day just to keep him alive. And this isn't any other of his medications. This is just for seizures. And the prognosis for Lennox-Gastaut, also known as LGS for short, is not good. Children die when they're young, mostly because they have accidents related to head trauma. So they'll be walking and have a seizure and hit their head and they'll die. He does not walk. He's in a wheelchair. We don't know if he'll walk. So maybe we won't have to worry about that particular issue. But there's lots of other issues, such as in Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, the seizures are resistant to treatment. So some of the best medications and therapies out there don't work for kids and families living with LGS. And so it's just kind of like, the future is, we don't know. And I am not unique. Our situation is not unique. There is a network of people that have LGS, not to mention other epilepsies. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So there's a whole community of people out there that can't get help or don't know because they really don't fit it into their schedule when they're trying to keep their family member alive. It's one of those things. Self-care, we all know, is something that people usually don't do for themselves. And we say, you really need to take care of yourself. Yeah, right. Right. When? When am I going to do that? Between when? There's only so many hours in a day, right? So that's why if you know more, and I obviously am willing to share, right? Then maybe you can help. You can come up with actually constructive ideas on how people like me, people in our community, can take care of themselves so they can take better care of their loved ones, which they don't have a choice in doing. Because if they decide they don't want to do that anymore, then the person will die. All right? So, on that note, we'll talk about Welcome to Holland. Has anyone ever heard of Welcome to Holland? Couple? Okay. Welcome to Holland was written by Emily Kingsley in 1987. She's a parent of a child that has Down syndrome, and she's also a helping professional. So she was asked to come up with a story or a poem or whatever you want to call it to give to other people, to kind of, people that both have disabled children born to them or other people in the community, to give them a peek into what it's like caring for a disabled child. And people really liked Welcome to Holland. It's very warm and fuzzy. So therapists and helping professionals, social workers, nurses, they decided that they were going to give it to everyone that had a child born to them that had a disabling condition. I have received this many times, both from the hospital where my son was in the NICU to workshops that I've attended while he has been in summer school, extended school year programs, or community programs for disabled children to kind of like help them in the pool and do fun things that other kids get to do that he doesn't get to do all the time. And Welcome to Holland has its place. It is meant to kind of say, look, it'll be okay. And if you're not familiar with Welcome to Holland, the point the author is trying to make is, she's making like an analogy to a trip, okay? People are going to Italy, like a traditional, typical child, okay? People are going to Italy, they're planning for Italy, they get to know the language of Italy, they're gonna have a lot of fun in Italy, they're so excited about Italy, they prepare for Italy. And then on the flight over to Italy, they're rerouted to Holland because they now have a child born with complications. They didn't know. They didn't know beforehand because they prepared for Italy. Because who would prepare? Who would plan to have a child that's disabled? You don't. It just kind of comes to you. Okay? And then you get to Holland, which is beautiful, but Holland's language is completely different. It's not even recognizable. For anyone that's actually ever been to Holland, it's like Chinese. There's no English anywhere. I've been there. I've been lost in the train station before. Scared. The first time ever traveling in Europe, I was scared because I didn't recognize anything. So in this, I was like, oh yeah, the Amsterdam thing, totally identified with that. But Holland has a totally different language. There's a whole new community, a different culture. Everything in Holland is different. But Italy still exists. People, you know, went to Italy. Everyone's having fun in Italy. They're sharing all about Italy. But you're in Holland. And you're the only one in Holland. So if you think about applying that to the disabled community, it's like, okay, Holland is the disabled community and Italy is the typical community. And so it has its place because Holland is beautiful. Holland has its challenges, but there are things in Holland that are great. You just might take a little time to find them. Windmills and tulips, it's all great. But it's just, you got to get through the rest of it. But Holland misses a lot of things. Holland misses the nitty-gritty, the day-to-day challenges. And that's what the blogger that answered to Amsterdam International addressed. But we'll get there. Okay, so we're going to have our only set of quizzes. So in your packet, there will, if you flip through it, you're like, what is this quizzes? Okay? It says quiz at the top. And we're going to complete the quiz together now. Yeah, and I had originally planned for, when we get to it, the photo identification section, doing one more additional slide, but I cut it out because I practiced on my family members, and they're like, this is enough. I'm like, okay. So I took their feedback, but I had already sent that to Susie, and she gave it to everybody. So, all right, so we're all looking at our quiz, right? We're all here. I promise this isn't going to be long, but this is just a peek into what Holland is like. Okay? All right, so let me get my little timer up because I'm timing. Just giving you a minute. That way you can have questions at the end. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is identify terms. This is the language of Holland. Okay? You have to learn the language if you're going to survive in Holland. All right, ready? Go. You got a minute? Do the best you can. All right, you got about 20 seconds left. No pressure.
Yeah.
10 seconds. Should I count down? Stop. Okay. This is the language of Holland. And this is medical jargon. This is special education jargon. These are things that we have to learn. Okay? I do have the answers, so I can help you if you stress out about them. All right. So is any of these surprising? Was there any surprises? People were like, what is Q6? What is that? Anybody? Anyone want to share? I won't make you. Some of this is medical jargon, and when you're in my community, you don't have a choice. If you want to have good conversations with doctors, you need to know what they're saying. If you want to keep up on your child's medication, because sometimes they get it wrong, you need to know what it means. Q6 is every 6 hours, so that's a medication that needs to be given every 6 hours. EID is Latin for twice a day. Okay. FTT is failure to thrive. So that was something my son, he was failure to thrive, diagnosed failure to thrive. Other things, and I'll go back. So like K-cows and number 1 and number 6 meals. When you have a feeding tube like my son does, you better know these. Otherwise, you're not going to get it right. Okay? We judge eating by milliliters. How much did you give him? 60 mils. How much is left? 120 mils. So this is the kind of language that you speak. This is what doctors reference. So you have to know. You have to know this language, or you will not be competent in the care of your family member or loved one. It's up to us. Okay. Oops. Wait. You got it. Are you ready? All right. So now you are going to name that specialist. So these are health problems. What kind of doctor treats them? And be specific. $30 seconds. Seconds. Okay, stop. Did anyone get one right? Dermatologist. These problems are easy to come up with for me because these are all problems that my son has. So he has all of these doctors. He has an ophthalmologist, he has a GI, he has a pulmonologist, a neurologist, a hematologist, a cardiologist, an otolaryngologist is an ENT, that's what we call an ENT. He has an audiologist, he has a dermatologist, and a urologist. He has all of those people plus. This doesn't include people that help with the cleft. This doesn't include other issues that he has crop up with nutritionists or all these other things. But these are problems that he deals with every day that we have to maintain to keep him alive. And not just that. Life isn't just about living. It's about having fun, too. He's 3. So we also try to keep him happy and entertained and doing things that his typical peers do. And we try not to let these types of things interfere with daily living because we still need to survive ourselves by, getting together with friends and family, making trips to Target. We can't just let these kinds of problems stop us. Otherwise, we'd be in the house all day, and that's just no fun. Okay, so the next couple of slides, you're going to identify photos of medical and other equipment. Okay, so you're going to have pictures, and you're going to try to identify the items in the pictures, and you have to be specific as you can. All right, so I'm going to give you a minute for each slide. All right, so ready? Go. Don't feel bad. You got 30 seconds. And this is number 8. I couldn't get it to fit. All right, got 10 seconds. Okay, stop. Did anyone know what anything in here was? Any of these pictures? You did? Who? Which one? Which one did you get?
Tongue swab, but okay, so, number 2, is that blood pressure?
Nope.
Okay, I know number 5 is a nebulizer.
Yes.
6 is the hearing aid.
Yes, the horn. That's called a horn.
Okay, well, is 4 the tongue swab for moisture in the mouth?
Yes and no. Okay, so I'll show you what these are. And these were also easy for me to come up with because we use them every day. Every day in Harvey's care. And you have to be specific because one of the other really great things you get to do when you're the caretaker of a loved one who is disabled is order medical equipment. How fascinating. Okay, so when you call your DME, Durable Medical Equipment Company, to put in your monthly supply order every month, you have to say, I need a 10 mil slip tip syringe. That's what number 1 is, 10 mil slip tip. 10 mil slip tip. You have to say that specifically. If you don't know, they're going to ask you. If you don't know, then you don't know. And you're going to get something that you can't use. And this is something that we use to give medication. Number 2 is a Mickey button. That's what is used for a gastro tube, a G tube. So my son is 100% dependent on a G tube for nourishment and life-saving medication. So we feed him with a tube via a Mickey button. That's how he eats. He doesn't eat anything by mouth because he can't. Because if he does, he will choke. And he already has chronic lung disease from that, which is why we have nebulizer. Okay. Other things. So number 4, it is a mouth swab. They're called toothettes. My son has oral aversions because of his cleft lip he's had in his mouth. So we brushed his teeth with toothettes. And I have examples of these things up here so that when we're all done, you can come see what they are. And I will show you pictures later of how much of our house is stuffed with medical supplies. So these are all items that are related to breathing, hearing, and feeding. And at this time, my volunteer, so I have 6 role play volunteers, 30-second role play. Oh, okay, I've got 2. I need at least 3 because I can play the other one. Okay, we got 1. Okay, all right. So 6. I need at least 6 people to go out to the hallway with my husband Daniel, and he will give you. I got 4, 5. One more. Woo! Okay, we got 6. I knew. I just knew. At first, I was doing participate. Okay. All right. So we're going to do the second photo identification quiz. All right, and then that's going to be it for. Reset my timer. Okay, here we go. Let's go. Identify these items.
That's Mama.
Mama. asking about the items on the child's arms. And you have to be specific, because again, you have to order. Seconds. 10. Okay, stop. Anyone know what any of these items are? These ones were harder. So number 10 are AFOs. I have an example of my son's. These are orthotics that people use to help them with walking. He uses them to help his practice because his feet kind of, if people were pigeon-toed or they were out like this, they had corrective devices. That's what these are, okay? Number 11 is called no-no braces. These are a horrifically cute, they look cute, right? They're terrible. These are braces that are put on children's arms to keep them from bending their elbows if they've had something on their face that is like a tube or a surgery. So like when my son had his lip repair and he had stitches and he had like a little tube in his nose to help his nose with healing, he couldn't touch his face. So he had to have these wonderful contractions on his arms so he could not bend his arms. So he couldn't feel his tummy. He couldn't really do anything, okay? And he had to have these repeatedly throughout all of his surgeries if he's had a tube and, any kind of tube or anything up here. Number 12 and 13 are adaptive equipment. We have both of these items in our home to help Harvey get off the ground and get moving. He just stands in them at this point, but at one point he could walk, but he's lost that since his seizures have impacted his brain. Number 14 is a 2x2 split gauze. And you gotta order 2x2 split gauze because if you order regular gauze, you're not gonna be able to use it. Number 16, does anyone know what those are? 16, the little caps. Believe it or not, they're called orifice reducers. That's what you kind of, depending on your prescription or the pharmacy that you use, if you have like a liquid, they'll stick these in the bottle so that you can stick a syringe in them to get it out without dumping it everywhere. Unfortunately, not all pharmacies use them, have them, care about them, even though they make your life a lot easier. So magically, you can order them off the internet in bulk, or you can like harvest them from your nearby hospital pharmacy, which we go to Hopkins for everything, so they give them to us. But they make life a lot easier. We use them every day. All of these items we have in our home, we use them every day. Shaker bottle, or people got shaker bottle, protein shakes or whatever. That's what we use to mix Harvey's formula. Okay. So I'm going to show you some photos, and then we'll have our role plays. So I want to give you just a couple of pictures of Harvey in our house and kind of our daily routine. But you have to remember that these are not specific to me. The picture of my child is not unique to me. You have to remember when you're working with people in the disabled community, especially parents and caretakers of children who are disabled, this is quite familiar to all of us. Okay? So this is a picture of Harvey after he was born. This is actually the first way that I saw him. My husband's hand was inside the incubator to take a picture of Harvey. He had all these tubes. This is how he was staying alive. He was on oxygen. This is my first experience with Harvey after a traumatic birth, a traumatic early delivery. This is how I see him. Okay, so I'm a hormonal mom, and this is the first exposure I have to my child. And I didn't get to see him for a couple of days after he was born because I was healing, and I couldn't go to see him in the NICU. Thankfully, it was in the same hospital we were in, but for some parents, their children have to be flown to another hospital, and they don't get to see them. Maybe not for a week until they can make it to the hospital. This next picture I just love because, I want to do one. Why did they both come? Okay, there we go. This is Harvey after he was a couple of weeks old. He hard to believe like how little he was. And I just love him. I mean, he looks like a baby doll. But I mean, we spent all day, every day in the NICU to see him. While I'm supposed to be on maternity leave, right, taking care of a newborn, I'm going to the hospital while other people take care of him and keep him alive. And that's how we get introduced to Holland. That's the first thing. They're talking about mills. They're talking about CPAP. They're talking about nasal cannula. You're like, what? What? I don't understand what that is. You have to figure it out. This other picture here is from Harvey when he has, what's on his head is that he was at a video EEG, so they couldn't really get his EEGs on a traditional EEG, which is usually about 45 minutes in an outpatient setting. So he was admitted to the hospital for 3 days to do a video monitoring EEG. So it was like they had a camera on us, so if we picked our nose or something, like the neurologist got to see that. But Harvey was also there, and he was hooked up until they got enough information. And what they found was that 80% of his brain activity was abnormal. And that was before his diagnosis of LGS, a year and change before. But this is him. This is him playing. And this is the life that we try to make so that our otherwise very sick child can be happy. And this doesn't end there. This is just 3 of them. So the next couple of pictures are a peek into daily routine. So we have a bunch of syringes there, and that's Harvey's foot. We give a lot of medication, and so we have 8 to 10 syringes in the morning and in the evening, and depending on his condition, we have to give them during the day as well. So we have water, we have an extension tube, we have all these medication tubes, and a nebulizer treatment right there on the end. This is every day, twice a day, just to keep him living. Okay, and we have to do it. This is a picture of, I don't know why it's doing that, okay, Harvey's hand. Because he has blood disorders and he's on these very serious medications, he has to have blood drawn regularly. And, as adults even, sometimes like, ugh, I don't want to get my blood drawn, but he goes every couple of weeks to get blood drawn. Because he has to. You have to see what his levels are in his blood. Levels, what is that? You have to see how the medication is interacting with his blood. Is it damaging his liver? What's going on? We don't know. We have to see. So this picture is actually after an extended hospital stay where they were having trouble getting IVs into him. And his hand, he has a stick in his hand now from 3 weeks ago. Because he has a blood disorder, he doesn't heal very quickly. So it just stays there. And he actually has a scar in his hand from that one. But he is a champion when he gets his blood drawn. He doesn't even blink. I mean, what 3-year-old do you know, really? That is just like, get over it. Just don't make the tourniquet too tight, right? That part's the worst, actually. This is just an example of one trip to the pharmacy. A couple breathing treatments. We got some ointments there, and some Miralax because he needs those because all the medications really do a number on your bowels. Here is a picture of just one blood draw. How much blood they have to take from him. And I have to know. So sometimes, since my son he is now a hard stick, is what they say. It's difficult to get blood from him. I have to know what tests they're doing because I'm like, all right, we need a couple blue caps, but can you make sure you get a good one for his Depakote level because we really need to know his Depakote level. And so they're like, okay, so I have to know so I can help the phlebotomist who doesn't know him, just has the tests, prioritize his blood. I have to help them prioritize the testing for his blood. That's my job. That's the language of Holland. And it's not just me, my husband, my father-in-law. We all take him to all of his appointments. We all have to know. It's very overwhelming sometimes. This is a picture of his medications lined up. This our microwave is full of medications. Pills, coupons, medications. That's ours. That's what, 8 that he's on. And we've added one since. And they always change. So we have to be flexible. We have to write it down because they're always changing the meds and we have to keep track. Next, I'm going to show you. Most people have, if they have kids, they have a changing table, right? Everyone has a changing table. We have one. My father-in-law made it. Yes, he made that. Very proud of you. But if you look at our changing table, you start to notice that our changing table has things in it that most people don't have. Like the first row is all breathing treatments. The second row is bags, feeding bags for his pump. And the third row has like miscellaneous supplies in it. I dumped out all the syringes in his drawer. That's how many syringes I have. We have a stockpile of syringes. We use them every day for medications and for food and all that. That's the drawers. I have a better picture of the drawers. Top drawer. How many people have medical gloves in their changing table? Not many, right? Toothpicks. That's what we use to brush his teeth. This is our syringe drawer. This is our bottom drawer, which has miscellaneous medical supplies in it that we need, that we don't need every day, but we need them. Those people's changing tables don't have these things. So this is a reminder for us that our life isn't like everyone else's. Our child's changing table should have clothes in it. Nope, it's got medical supplies. Okay, so our volunteers are going to do their role plays for you. Okay, so I need scenario 1 to come up. We're trying to go through these kind of quickly. They're not long. I'm going to give you and here's our prop for the parent. The parent has a prop. This is Freddie the Frog. He's Hardy's to-be friend. He has a button inside. Okay. So I'm going to read you the scenario. So the parent, who's the parent? Parent, okay. Parent is in the checkout line at Target. The child is nonverbal and has a feeding pump, which we forgot. We forgive. And tube that is hooked up and is discreetly tucked away in a backpack, but is still partially visible to the general public. While standing in line, the customer behind begins to notice the child and inquires about the child.
Oh, how cute. How old is he?
2.5.
Oh, what a cute age. Hi, little one. How are you? Can you see me? Hi, little one. How are you? What's wrong with him?
Nothing. Yes. Nothing. Scenario 2. And scenario 3 can be on deck. Scenario 2, we have a parent and child. And this can be the yes. This is a wheelchair. This is a wheelchair. This is Harvey's. Harvey is in a wheelchair, but this is our wheelchair for today. So the parent is purchasing goods at a convenience store with a child in a wheelchair. The wheelchair does not fit down the aisles, which the clerk clearly witnesses, yet says nothing. The parent brings items for checkout to the counter.
You find everything okay?
Actually, no. I couldn't fit down the aisles because your aisles are not wheelchair accessible, so I can only shop around the store.
Well, it's because the aisles are made for regular people.
Well, excuse me, I'm going to take the business elsewhere.
All right, scenario 3, we have a parent and a family member. The parent receives a call from a family member asking to take the parent's children on an overnight trip. The parent consents and begins to discuss plans, including the needs of the youngest child, who has a feeding tube, still wears diapers at age 6, and has other physical restrictions. The family member interjects.
Hi, I was calling to ask if I could take the kids camping this coming weekend.
Oh, gosh, that'd be great. I'll make sure I'll get all the supplies ready for Jack so that you'll have everything.
Oh, no, not Jack. I meant Brittany and Philip. I want to take the 2 older kids. It'll be fun.
Well, wait, why not Jack too?
Oh, well, you know, because I can't deal with his issues and all that during the weekend. We'll be really busy and I just don't have time for all
No,
that.
well then, forget it. Just then nobody will be going.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to our role players. The first 2 role plays actually happened to Harvey. I was in Target and people look at us. That's one thing in our community is that when we're walking, they look. And sometimes they're smiling, thank you But sometimes they look and they're really not sure what's going on or what to think about our situation, and some people are quite rude. And I have had people say, well, what's wrong with them? And my response was, nothing was wrong with you, you know. But I said nothing, and I give kisses because, you know, even though he can't hear very well, we don't know what he can understand. So how dare you, right? How dare you? The second one with the convenience store happened to my mom with Harvey, and the clerk actually said because the aisles are made for normal people. And her reaction was quite like what y'all's was like. You know, and then the guy, you know, he tried to make it right, but he just made it worse. You know, oh, they're made for skinny people like me. My mom is a marathon runner. Okay, she's very thin, so that wasn't appropriate either. And you better believe that I'm the commissioner and the county, and they're investigating, and a file has been made with the Americans with Disabilities Act violation with the Department of Justice. It's what I have to do. It's what I have to do to make sure my child and family members get the treatment that they need and deserve. The last one actually happened to a friend. She has multiple children. Some siblings are typical, and her youngest is her miracle. And this happens all the time. Her family members, and not luckily for me, but family don't want to, not interested in taking on the challenge, spending time with their loved one. And so then everyone loses out. And these things happen all the time. People say things that are inappropriate daily. And so you're reminded daily that your life isn't like everyone else's. So how do you deal with that? Well, the blogger that wrote Amsterdam International, she came up with a response. Holland has its place, but Holland leaves out all the other things I've shared. Holland is warm and fuzzy, and there are a lot of times in our life that it's not warm and fuzzy. And if I need help and I seek assistance, which you guys know doesn't happen as often as it should, this is kind of the stuff I'm living with. And what I really like about Amsterdam International is that the author specifically mentions grief. That's kind of left out in our community. People say it's like, oh, it's this, it's chronic stress, it's all that. But people are grieving. And sometimes they don't know that. They don't know because they think grief is death. But my loved ones is alive. They're not dead. What is that about? And what I like about Amsterdam International is that in addition to the story that you can read on your own time, the author interjects with things in parentheses that are like italicized and kind of says what you don't know right now is that this becomes normal. What you don't know right now is that the grief comes in waves. It comes over and over and over. Every time you get to a place that's what you consider a new normal, something else happens, like with Harvey's medical history. You get to a place where you can manage it, bam, you're in the hospital for 3 weeks and you've lost everything you can. So you start over. And grief in our community happens over and over and over again. And so it's like, okay, where's my resilience? How do I get back to a place where I can function? Okay, so in order to prepare for today, I contacted my parent peers in the Facebook world because there's community for everything, right? And I told them I was coming. And I said, what do you want counselors in training or counselors, mental health professionals to know? And I did come up with some suggestions. So this is just like a brief thing, and I'm going to kind of just go into the other things really quickly because I really want to share what the parents reported as their main issues that they had trouble dealing with. But in your packet, I put a couple articles in there. This is now where I'm going to reference them. So what to say and what not to say, people first language, research, blah, 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 goes on. So what not to say to special needs parent or person. Dr. Darla Clayton, who is a doctor, among other things, also a blogger, wrote an article about 15 things never to say to a special needs parent. And these are just a couple. These are just a couple things, like my uncle's brother's nephew's cousin has autism, so I know what that's like. Okay? No. And God only gives you what you can handle. I really hate this one because that makes a lot of assumptions about my religious beliefs or lack thereof. And saying something to make yourself feel better. You're not really taking an interest in what's going on with me. It's kind of more placating. And I don't know how you, people say all the time, oh, I just couldn't do it. I don't know how you could do it. Well, I don't know how I do it either. Thanks for reminding me, right? I know these are well-meaning things that people don't really know are actually kind of hurtful. And you know, if you're a parent of it, you do it because you have to. You figure it out. You have to. She got a lot of grief from this article because people were like, oh, they're just trying to be nice and they're just blah blah. You know, there's obviously people that don't understand. And as counselors, I think like sometimes we end up in a situation where we're working with someone and we're like, okay, what do I say? What do I say? I've already restated, I've already reframed. Like, how many times can I do that before I sound like a broken record? You know, I'm not making any progress. We're not working on the relationship. So she came up with a response, which I was really thankful for, on 17 things you can say to a parent of a child who has special needs without sounding like a jerk. Because part of it is doing something, having something to say. Like, why should you have to have a pocket full of responses when you're going to the grocery store on how to respond to someone that just has no couth? If you're sure what to say, these are the things to say. So, you know, people try to make a connection, right? When they say, oh, whatever has autism, people are trying to make a connection. And so they're trying to identify with what your life is like. But sometimes they do it and they're like, I totally know you. And you're like, no, you don't. And we know as counselors, you never say, I know exactly how you feel. I totally understand, because that's not possible. It's not possible. You have not physically been by my side, attached to me, and lived all of my life experiences to know exactly. No. You might be able to understand a little bit what it's like, but you can never say, so, in other words, you make like connections. Oh, their son's really into trains, what's your son into? Okay? And with the whole guy thing, just you can remove that. Just say, I'll keep you in, and it says prayers, and I'll keep you in my thoughts. Because as counselors, we kind of need to, unless we have like, we're like a patriarchal counselor, or we're working in a private school where we're talking about religion and that's a part of our daily life. You don't want to make any assumptions unless you've established that with your client ahead of time. So you just say, I'll keep you in my thoughts. And those are things that I say. I don't say, you know, have a blessed day or anything like that, because that is not appropriate. You know, just in a lot of ways you say, you know, you're in my thoughts. I'm giving hugs. You know, let me know when I can come over and give you water. And I don't know how you do it. Just say, he's great. You're so proud of him. These things. And so there's the two articles you have, and it was all kinds of suggestions on what to say, what not to say, and then how to respond to that instead. All right, people first language. This is kind of hard, but I can understand it. So this is where it comes in with my counselor hat, right? As a counselor, I can understand why Kathy Snow kind of advocated for people first language, which is not a new concept, but it is. She made it popular. And it's people first language is when you put the person before the disability and you describe what the person has, not who the person is. But it's not always appropriate to use. And this is when you have to get to know your client and your community. People that are in the autistic community don't like people first language because they don't see autism as separate from their being. They see it as their being and they live with it and it's a part of them. So if you try to separate it by being politically correct or you don't want to be offensive or anything like that, you could be doing more damage. I don't like it as a parent in some respects because it creates a gray area where there wasn't one before. So like in the chart, it says, instead of saying he is nonverbal, say they communicate with their eyes. Actually, I had a class where this came up and I was like, I don't like that. I can understand why a counselor would want to be positive, right? They can communicate with their eyes or a device or something. But as a parent, I'm like, but he can't talk. Nonverbal means can't talk. So if you say communicates with eyes, well then the question is, well, can they talk? So then that leaves a gray area that's not necessary. So when they were going to write my son's IEP and do people first language, but I was like, stop trying to protect me. I live with this every day. You are not protecting me. Maybe you're protecting yourself or you're helping yourself feel a little bit better, but this is doing me a disservice. And now, part of People First Language and your role as a counselor is to do research, right? So when you have an intake form in front of you, or you're going to meet with a client and they say, I have some syndrome or something that you haven't heard of that's in the DSM, you go to the DSM and you look at it, right? If they say, I'm taking care of a disabled child, or they don't, maybe it's during your intake that you find out. You need to look it up. Because when you look it up, you can ask the hard questions with your client. How do you want me to refer to your child? Do you want me to say they have special needs? Do you want me to say they're disabled? Do you prefer I just refer to them by their name? Okay? When you start researching and you start taking an interest in what your client's life is like, the rapport will go through the roof. Because then they can have a meaningful conversation with you. Because I get exhausted from having to explain my situation. How do I explain everything I've shared in 3 minutes with a stranger at the gas station? No. Okay? So if you take an interest and you say, oh yeah, I read up on that. Are you going to be doing that anytime soon? Then the parent is like, okay, I see that we can do this. We can do this. And they'll start to trust you. And you'll be able to build a rapport with them to make progress. Because without rapport, you can't have progress in a therapeutic relationship. You just can't. It's not going to happen. So researching the conditions that your client or their child is living with will really help you in the counseling relationship. And I think you guys. So the top self-reported challenges, this is the part that I was really excited about. This is what the other parents and other people in my community shared. They wanted you to know. And these are in like the top reported challenge, but these were all kind of close together. These are the majority. So people, parents and caregivers reported that other people deny the person's disability or minimize the severity. That happens a lot with disabilities that can be seen. So like epilepsy, it's not seen. Unless you're seeing a seizure take place, with some people it's really hard to identify what they are, then people say, oh, it's really not that bad, they'll just grow out. It's like, what? Are they minimized severity? They think maybe sometimes people are attention seeking, when they're saying things. It's like, no. And in order to protect himself, to protect myself from people that do that, because I don't need that drama, right? People start to isolate. They start to cut people off that create problems in their life. And then other people that are uncomfortable with the disabling condition, they self-isolate. They cut themselves off. So then you end up with a person who has removed themselves from people that don't understand if they can. And then their other people have left them because they can't handle it. So then what? They're left without a support network. They have no team to help them. And I have a hard time sometimes, and I have an extensive support network. And people that don't, single parents, nobody lives in the state, they struggle. They really, really struggle. And the coping skills just aren't there to get through. Guilt is huge. Guilt on, could I have done anything? Could I be doing more? Did I get the right care? Am I doing the right thing? The guilt is huge. If you have typical children, the guilt of spending most of your time with your disabled child, because if you don't live by, what can you do? I've kind of demonstrated that there's never ending doctor's appointments, phone calls. You're always following up on insurance. You're always checking this. You're always doing that. And if you don't, then you won't get the care that your loved one needs. And that itself, you're supposed to be at work, but you're using your work day to make phone calls to insurance. What are you going to do? And the big thing is, and it's the number 5, but it's right up there with number 1. There's only 1 or 2, because I analyzed the data, there's only 1 or 2 differences in reporting of these issues. So loss of future hopes and dreams is huge. People are reminded every day. And this is where the grief comes in. They deal with it every single day, and once you get through it, it's like, hey, and then it comes back. Because some bonehead at Target has reminded you that your child cannot see, that amazingly, though, you know, when we talk about resilience, people in my community, and including myself, we have found silver linings. Found it. It exists. It is plentiful. We celebrate things that most people don't even recognize. We don't have milestones. We call them instruments. Okay? That's like, people are like, oh, my 10-month-old isn't walking yet, and you're like, my son can hold his head up. You're like, yeah. Things that other people miss, we have like full-blown parties for. And so that's something that we become very proud of. Kind of feel sorry for those other people with typical children because they just totally look over huge developmental milestones. We've also learned to live every day to its fullest because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Maybe my son will have a seizure tonight that puts him in a coma. I have no way of knowing that. So we're going to live today for today, and we're going to plan for tomorrow, but tomorrow could bring, an extended hospital stay. So people in my situation, we have to live with those unanswered questions, those things that come around the corner that we cannot anticipate, that are scary. But we still have to live, or otherwise what would we be doing? We'd be stuck in our house organizing medical supplies. When you're in our community, you learn to find a voice if you didn't have one. You learn to have courage and confidence. You trust your instincts, and you get inner strength that you didn't think you had. You always think like you don't know what you can handle until you have it. That's true. And you find a voice because I actually remember when I found it. I've always had a voice, but with doctors and things, I'm like they're the professional and. No. There was one hospital stay when I was like, I've decided we're not leaving until you figure it out. And they were like, blah, blah, blah. I was like, nope, we're staying. And we stayed a whole week because they tried to send us home in 2 days and I didn't come back. So you start to trust your instincts, like that mama bear thing. People reported that if they have typical children, that they learn the siblings of typical children that are typical learn compassion and empathy a lot sooner than people that are their same age, that are their peers, because they have to share their life with someone who's disabled. And so I am pregnant, which was a difficult decision to make. It was, because we don't know if our next child will have any of the issues that Harvey did, because genetics is a big question mark, okay? But, this child will never know Harvey another way. Harvey will always be Harvey. And so this child will get to experience him in a world that's different. And it's not a bad thing. Think about the tulips and windmills from Holland, right? They'll be able to see through the things that other people in the grocery store can't even look. Finding support in unexpected places. I've mentioned Facebook a couple of times. There's a community and a group and a page for everyone. I'm on all of them. And my news feed is filled with questions on medical supplies and dealing with this. And, I'm working with people in Australia and we're talking about seizures and medication. And it's really great resource. And as a counselor in training, if your clients don't have Facebook, it's something you can recommend. Because even if they don't want they don't want to deal with it because it's a time waste or whatever, if they also have the opportunity to connect with people around the world. And with rare issues like Harvey's, we need people. We need people to connect with. And there's not a lot of standard support groups these days. And resilience, I kind of talked about resilience. Getting back to normal. I know right now we're kind of at the end of time, but since we didn't start on time, we're getting company. Other suggestions to parents from counselors is they want to be validated, because sometimes people don't validate them. They want you to ask hard questions, because that's why we're getting help, right? Because we need to face things that we aren't facing every day. Like I said before, people don't necessarily know that they're grieving, because they might think that grief is traditional with death, and in this situation it's not. It's the loss of hopes and dreams and plans. So sometimes they don't understand their grieving, and once they figure that out, they're like, okay, I know that. I know denial, bargaining error. Okay, I know all that. Okay, I can deal with that. Now I know. And then some other things. They want you to be resourceful if you're not connected with people that are, so you can help your client. And we know as counselors, but apparently it's a big deal to keep your feelings out of it. We know better, okay? So if you're ever having like moments where you're going to do like some transference or countertransference, just think about, is it for you? Is it for them? You know, just remind yourself. Apparently it's become an issue. Not you. And just that male and females have different coping mechanisms and cope with things differently. So while I might deal by presenting to my colleagues on really grief, my husband might not, you know, so how does he cope? And so you have to deal with gender issues and coping as well. All right, so we're wrapping up. This is why I didn't feel that. But if there's anything that you guys thought of while we were talking that you would want to try, or any questions you had, I encourage you right now to take a minute, like literally a minute, like I'm going to time you, and talk to your neighbor. And then if you have any suggestions to share, I'd like to hear them for myself as a counselor and because I'm a parent. So I'm going to give you a minute. So talk to your neighbor about anything, and then just hear. And then we'll just go from
Yeah, she is. She can go teach at the college. Yeah, and he was holding up that time really well.
I was afraid she was going to start over. So that 45 minutes again. All right.
We reset the clock. That was a great piece of furniture. Quite an investment.
They rushed me.
All right, you have a minute? Is there any suggestions from the group or anything? I did have like, I tried to keep it to an hour, but we started a little late because I wanted to be able to ask questions, but. So, yes?
Well, we were just talking about how it seems like it obviously can present challenges to a marriage or a family relationship.
That was one of the recorded things I said.
Because it's not a neutral thing. Like everybody has their reaction to it. It's not just male, female, but like everybody's distressed about it. So talking about your distress isn't neutral to your partner or whoever, or your in-laws, because everybody's distressed. But if everybody just gets distressed, then you can't work as a team. So you're trying to work as a team, but I would think a counselor would need to kind of help you find ways to validate. You all have your own reactions, and you can upset each other too.
That's a good point, because you know, on most of the groups it's moms. There's not a lot of dads on there. It's women are always seeking assistance, right? And then, no, not you. And you know, they say, you know, my husband doesn't do this, or he doesn't cope with it like this, and there's a lot of strain on marriages and financial strain as well. So, because he says cost, and not everyone's insurance is great to cover it. So it's a good idea. So you might even need like a marriage counseling to work on your issues processing living with disability. Anybody else? Any suggestions? Group counseling, I thought, was one thing. You know, if you had enough people in the community that could at least support each other and validate each other was one thing that I thought of. Yes.
You. And I mean that from the standpoint, and we've been talking about this on and on yesterday, today, that in the counseling program, how much information on this topic did we have?
I took the grief class. And so I, was able to reference some of my old materials that I had, and I am the counselor that gets called for grief situations and crisis in school. So I don't know, I would feel uniquely positioned to be the parent of a child with a disability, although it's not something I would choose for myself. But it is something that, it is a shared experience, but it's not talked about because it is also very unique. So you
Right.
can't really
But I think it puts counselors at a disadvantage not to hear about all of these different unique situations that human beings find themselves in. And I think it just expands our possibilities in terms of areas that really need attention.
Yeah, I would agree. It's one of the areas that needs attention. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So I just wanted to wrap up. So today we talked about, all right? We talked about just a couple of Greek basic concepts, and when we think about those, I just want to readdress those. We have ambiguous loss. We have ongoing loss that has no closure. We don't know when it's going to end. We're experiencing type 2 trauma almost on a daily basis because we have chronic exposure to traumatizing situations. Each hospital stay, you never know what's going to happen. You don't know how long you're going to be there. We've spent birthdays, holidays, wedding anniversaries. We had a wedding anniversary at the hospital. And so we experience these over and over and over. And then to try to come back to a new normal with resilience is very difficult to do. And that's where people with no support network need you as helping professionals to help them through that. I kind of talked about shared experiences, and I have things up here that you can look at. We've discussed suggestions and counsel, which, please, if you have any more, give them. And if you remember, my ultimate goal was to give you some insight into the lives of the community so you could better support us. And I hope that I've been able to do that without just talking about myself, which is very easy for me to do. But I want you to remember that things that I talk about aren't unique to me. They're not unique to us. 1 in 5 people live lives similar to us. So it's really important that you keep that in mind. All right? And so if you have any questions, you can see me. My email is on the top of my resources page. So you can email me if you have questions. I do have an evaluation in with your packet that I would like, so if I ever give this again, I'll be able to get some feedback from you that's constructive, so I can don't just put all down. Just give me a really constructive counselor, okay?
It's inside the front pocket of your folder.
Inside the front pocket.
The half sheet.
And if you have any questions, or if you want, you want to be in contact, just email me. It's on the top of my resources page, which just has brief resources I've used over the years, and also websites. I also have different supplies up here that you can see. These are birthday boards I made for Harvey for his birthdays, so that people could see, kind of a summary of our year. He has a birthday coming up on Tuesday. He'll be 3, and yeah. So thanks for having me.